Hey everyone, welcome to our Q&A session for December 2023, last one of the year. Lots of really fantastic questions this month. I'm gonna answer 3, maybe more, and this one we'll see how long it takes. And of course you can go down into the video details below and skip forward to specific questions if you don't want to listen to them all. So let's get started. Sharon wrote, asking about treating the person rather than the disease. I love this question. And more specifically, treating the person's expression of energetic disharmony rather than treating a named pathology or an existing named disease. So for folks who maybe this is new, generally, when people think about treating a disease, the disease already has a name. So let's say the disease name is arthritis. And arthritis doesn't mean anything, right? What it is a word that shortcuts to a collection of symptoms that are common in most people who have this similar pathology. So when we talk about somebody having arthritis, generally they have to meet, let's say, 7 out of 10 qualifiers in order to be considered for that disease, as well as how that pathology is expressing. So inflammation and pain and limited range of motion and swelling and redness and, whatever. So there's one style of herbalism, kind of a reductionist pop style of herbalism, where if somebody was diagnosed with arthritis, they would open up an herb book or go online and say, what herbs do I take for arthritis? And the response would be, oh, here's 5 herbs that are good for treating arthritis. And they would take those herbs and they would have about a 50-50 chance that maybe they would get some relief from that or not. Or also, a good chance they might even aggravate that condition or drive it further into their tissues. So the question that Sharon is bringing up is brilliant because it reminds us that A, arthritis doesn't mean anything. It's just a word that's a shortcut to a collection of symptoms. B, the arthritis in one person's body is not the same arthritis in somebody else's body. While the collection of symptoms, the pathology, and the projected outcome of the disease might be relatively identical, the way that each person will hold that disease state is unique. So that's important. And C, everybody is expressing disharmony, dis-ease from a unique state. So they existed in a unique place before the disease manifested, and that disease is coming from the unique state that they exist in as an individual person. So basically what that means is that when we look up the 5 herbs that are good for treating arthritis, we're ignoring the fact that the arthritis is happening in your body and not the person whose body those 5 herbs were considered for, that your energetic expression of that disharmony might be different than the average person or different than the status quo, and that the person you are underneath the disharmony, your version of you, influences the disease pathology, and that's definitely not being taken into consideration. So when we treat diseases, names, arthritis, headache, kidney infection, respiratory infection, flu, when we treat a disease name, we're doing exactly that. We're treating a disease. We're managing your health. We're assuming that your body doesn't know how to do it itself, and that without our intervention on behalf of your body, this disease can't be controlled and it can't be managed. And that's all it is, right? Is approaching the disease. We're trying to control it, mitigate symptoms, suppress symptoms, improve your quality of life. All of that to some degree is okay, I guess. We can't talk about, and don't in allopathic medicine, talk about cure. Because the only way to cure somebody is to acknowledge who they are as an individual underneath the disease state. If we don't know who they are on a unique level, then we don't know what it is we're trying to get back to. Does that make sense? Disease just means that you have stepped out of your version of center for one reason or another. All kinds of different reasons can cause that. You have stepped out of your version of center into a state that for somebody else might be totally normal, but for you is disharmonious. It's pathological, it's disease. If we don't know who you are, who the disease is, and connect them, we don't know the path to bring you back to your version of health, which is cure. That's curative, right? So that's why this is important. So for me, the big thing, and I'm just making sure I'm going to actually answer the questions. In summary, how to see people as persons and not their disease. I think the big thing for me is there's this practice that I do in my clinic where when somebody comes in and they say, I have been diagnosed with this disease, I say, okay, I hear you. I know about that disease, or I don't know about it. I'm going to do some research real quick or whatever. I'm going to have you take this little Post-it and you're going to write down arthritis. Okay? I'm going to take it off, fold it up, and just set it on the table. Just set it down right here. You pick it up in a minute, but you just set it down. We're just taking the shortcuts off the table. And now I want you to tell me how it feels. How do you feel? What was happening that let you know that something was wrong before you had the diagnosis, before you had the word, the shortcut, right? So now they're going to start talking about how they feel, where it's showing up, when it's better, when it's worse, what aggravates it, what pacifies it, how does it feel when they touch it, what little hacks have they figured out that can make it a little better or that make it worse, what emotions come up, what was going on in their life when the disease state first started, what other kinds of disease states have they had in their life, and are they related, right? So now we're not even talking about arthritis anymore. We're not talking about the disease at all. I spend 99% of my clients' time not talking about their disease because it's not helpful. I don't want to manage the disease. I want the disease to go away. We spend our time talking about them, their experiences, their narrative, how their body is manifesting it, what their body is telling them, what they're feeling, what they're experiencing. So we're treating them, right? So if we have somebody who constitutionally runs very fiery, they're a fiery person, they're warm, their cheeks are always flushed, they've got a high metabolism, they're go, 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 and they've moved into a hot, fiery, sharp, arthritic condition, right? The joints suddenly are painful to the touch, and you look at them and there's redness around them, and there's a lot of resentment and anger in the person around the fact that now their hands are really hard to work with and they're in pain all the time. Without knowing something about the person, that they're fiery by nature, I wouldn't know that all the body has done is taken the innate fiery nature and went overcorrect with it, pushed too far. Path of least resistance, they've gone from fiery to inferno-y, right? And I wouldn't know how to help bring them back to their version and center. All I would do is just treat the disease, and it's just managing, right? It's not curing, and it's not honoring the person. So hopefully that makes sense. We talk to people about their experiences, how they feel, how it's showing up in their body, what was happening in their lives. We center them, and then that will tell us, what went wrong, and how do we bring herbs in and other things too that will help you give your body the power and the wisdom it needs to reconcile that and get you back to your version of center. So, fantastic question, Sharon. Thank you. Another one. Do you have a checks and balances method? This is a great question for not slipping into obsession. A few videos back, you mentioned you had only one patron deity, and part of the reason it was only one was because that makes for fewer people that you need to feed. I did say that. I think many of us get excited and try to take on too much and find ourselves overwhelmed. Absolutely. Did you ever have a time you were overwhelmed, just honoring too many deities, ancestors, spirits too frequently? If so, how did you cut back and ensure you kept things within reasonable limits for yourself going forward? Such a good question. Thank you for bringing this up, because I'm guaranteeing lots of other people have this question too. So I am prone to do the same thing. If I'm reading about some tradition, some deities, or some plants or whatever, I'm like, oh, I want to be friends with them, right? But those relationships take a lot of work, and the more relationships we're balancing and working on, especially non-human relationships, because they take extra work, suddenly our day is full. So here's what I do. First, I acknowledge that about myself, that I want to collect all the friends, right? I want to learn from all the people and sit at all the feet of all the great gods and have them tell me all the secrets of the universe. I want that. That's just reality. But I'm one person, and I have, however many years of life to live. And in order to get to the places where non-human persons, especially the ones we would call deities, start really dumping heavy amounts of information into your heart, heavy downloads and guidance, it usually requires quite a bit of work. So the way that I look at it, you're better off with 1, 2, 3 deities as like your core household or pantheon that you put a great deal of energy into, rather than shallower relationships with 20, because it's going to take longer in a shallow investment in 20 to get to the point where you're aligned and attuned with them enough that they can really start teaching you. So, the reality is the best thing to do is to pick one and stick to one, or 2 or 3. I think 3 for me is like when it starts falling apart. I think about the Smarta tradition of Hinduism, contemporary Hinduism, the Smarta Sampradaya, where they have 5 deities. Everyone works with the same 5. Everyone has an Ishtadevata, one of those 5 that they're a little closer to than the rest. And they've limited it. They're like, look, you can't, there's a billion deities. You can't do it all. So they might change over time, and that's okay. You might invest a year or 2 into one deity and be like, okay, this is not going anywhere, or they've handed me off to somebody else. We have to honor that. That's a whole other thing we could talk about. But I think that's it. And then, we have these opportunities throughout the year to acknowledge, to nod, to do a little curtsy towards other deities that we're not in deep relationship to. So maybe you don't work a Greek model, and maybe you don't have a deep connection to Persephone and Demeter and Hades, but at the changing of the year, when their mythos is active, because they are agricultural deities, right? So for plant nerds, there's always kind of an affinity with those kinds of deities. You could do a little something for them, read about them, or maybe there's a local group that's doing something and you can go and you just a little tip of the hat. To me, that scratches the itch for me. So there's that part, especially with deities. The rest is the term all, or the spirits who help me. So behind me here, I have an altar that is dedicated to the plant spirits all, right? It's one space, one area of focus. When I'm sitting with an individual plant spirit, when we do our monthly plant spirit journeys, I make a little space in the center in front of the world tree there for that plant spirit. But the rest of the time, that space just kind of represents all of them. So I get to feel like I'm paying my dues, like I'm honoring them and acknowledging them and keeping a sacred space for them. But I'm not trying to feed billions of plants. I'm not trying to nourish relationships with that many plants. I'm trying to nourish relationships with like 15, right? My closest ones that I work with the most. The same can go for, ancestors, that we can have a little ancestral shrine that's for all of them. So we can group them together loosely, tightly, whatever works for you, and allow the ones that stand up, that reciprocate, to be the ones that the relationship develops with. If you're praying to a deity and making offerings and celebrating their mysteries and reading about them and all that, and within a month you're not getting some kind of a response, move on. Just because they're gods doesn't mean that we don't grovel, right? So we're trying to enter into relationships of sacred reciprocity and kinship. Kinship shares that etymological word with kindness. So if we're giving and giving and opening our hearts and sitting in meditation and trying to make a connection to them, and there's no reciprocity, move on. It could be us, it could be them, it could be both of us, it could be bad timing, but put your energy where there's good energetic ecology. Like don't dump it into where you think it should go rather than where there's actually reciprocity. And it's easy for us to think, oh, is there payback? Like, am I getting the blessings in return for the work that I'm doing? That sort of transactional way of thinking. It's very easy for us to fall into that. Try not to. It's not about transaction. It's not about I've given X, X, and X, and you've given nothing. It's more about reciprocity. Like, are you choosing to participate in this ritual of reciprocity with me or not? And if not, I'm going to do what my ancestors would have done, which is I'm going to stop invoking you. I'm going to stop praying to you. The deity that I'm the closest, and this is like a huge tangent, but it's coming through, so I'm assuming it's somebody out there needs to hear it. The deity that I work with now and have for years, I never intended to have this kind of relationship with. Never, never. I was more like, a little flirtatious with Demeter and Pan and Asclepius and Ermid, like herbalist gods, right? But I was researching and I read a couple of books and I went to a seminar from somebody, and before I made a gift, gifts started coming to me, and I was like, oh shit, like that's unexpected. And I love when things happen unexpected because it proves that it's real, right? If only what we want or expect happens, then it's easy for us to think that it's all coming out of our own head. But when it's unexpected and we're like, oh, okay, cool. So I'm in this relationship and I continue to be in this relationship and work on it and nourish it and listen and show up, because that cycle of reciprocity continues and it gets deeper and deeper all the time. So I'm right where I want to be. The deity that I work with has actually instructed me on a few occasions to work with a different deity, not instead of him, but alongside him, right? So that's a thing. I still fight it tooth and nail. I've opened myself up to it, but I get stressed out. I'm like, oh, another mouth to feed. My candle budget is just, raising to Game of Thrones level. So hopefully that's helpful. Tangent. Last question we're going to do, because I've been verbose today. Donald asked, do you have any favorite cordial or simple syrup herbal combinations? My wife made a blackberry and basil simple syrup that was delicious. That sounds right up my street. I haven't done a ton of these. There's someone here locally that does a bunch of syrups and extracts, Amber Billingsley. If you're in Salt Lake, I'm doing a workshop with her early February on syrups and extracts. So there you go. But we made one, and I made one in a workshop with her maybe a year and a half ago, which was like chocolate based. We did like cacao nibs and chicory and like cinnamon and cardamom. And basically we were putting the simple syrup into drinking chocolate as what we were using to sweeten it, and it was decadent, like incredible. And then she did another one that was like an aphrodisiac simple syrup. I think it was Damiana, rose, cardamom, maybe cinnamon. So good. I was putting it in tea. I was putting it in fizzy water. So I love those. They're very well preserved because of the sugar, and you do get a full extract. So with things like aromatic herbs, berries, like think about elderberry and hawthorn, the simple syrups, the syrup extracts are a really cool way to get the medicine into your life every day, whether you're doing like a really heavy syrup that you're going to drizzle over your oatmeal every morning, or something that you can add to your hot chocolate or coffee or your tea. or something that you're just taking straight. I was talking with somebody the other day too about doing infused honeys to then use in baking, right? Which is just so cool. So I'm really glad you brought that up because this is a great season to be doing this kitchen herb craft. They're great gifts and they bring so much flavor. And the last point I'll make, if you garden or if you have community gardens where you live or whatever, and you harvest your herbs, at the end of the year, sometimes you just have more than you're going to burn through in a year. And you're like, they made the blackberry and basil. So maybe you're like, God, we have so much we're never going to go through all this basil with all the pesto, all the marinara, all the respiratory teas that we're going to make. We're still not going to go through it. These simple syrups are such a cool way to put all those herbs to work, to make sure they're all being used once they've been harvested. So often when I see various herb farms that I work with they've got too much of an herb and they put an herb on sale, I'm like, all right, how can I put an extra pound of this herb, to work? What will I make? Where's it going to go? And simple syrups are awesome. And so if you're a mixologist, if you're like the cocktails, the mocktails, you can go nuts with this stuff. It's super, super cool. So I'm going to wrap it up there. We're past the 20-minute mark. 3 really great questions. Thank you guys. I post a question call on my Patreon every month on the 20th. You get to put your questions. Some of them I reply to directly. Most of them end up in these videos, and then the video goes up on the last day of the month. I appreciate so much all of the good questions. It's so inspiring to me and keeps me on my toes and thinking. And honestly, I get a lot of our Friday class ideas from the questions that you all send in. So thank you so much. Happy New Year. I will see you guys in the coming year. Take care. Blessings, peace, and plenty. See you soon.